Hi viewers, while scrolling through the YouTube, you came across this video and started watching. Might be you are still thinking what's next. This is indeed a total function which is due to a specialized organ system in your body, and that's none but your nervous system. The nervous system allows you to do a lot of functions. It keeps you informed about what's happening in your surrounding and the world at large. The lady reading a newspaper, while she reads, she connects this in her brain to interpret and get an understanding of what she is reading. It also harmonizes all voluntary and muscular activities in the body, which makes this lady give elegant performance on a stage with respect to a background music. When you are in a party, it allows you to enjoy it with all excitement, and that is also well coordinated movements due to your nervous system itself. Other than that, it is capable of regulating a large number of involuntary activities in your body. This also allows us to think, memorize, invent, plan, and come across various emotions. This is all that is a work of the nervous system of our body. Let's see what are the unit structures that help this nervous system to work so efficiently. The structural and functional unit of the nervous system is a neuron. It has a very highly specialized shape, not like any other normal cells of the body. This is highly elongated cell, which may range from some few millimeters to even 1 meter in length. This is divided into three distinct parts: the dendrites, which are tree branching like structures emerging out from the cyton. These dendrites receive signals from the other neurons. Then comes a more cellular structure, which is called the cell body, because it resembles to certain extent the other normal cell-like structures for any other part of the body. It is provided with a nucleus, also surrounded by the Golgi apparatus and endoplasmic reticulum in the perikaryon surrounding it. But this lacks centrosome, so the power of division for a neuron is lost after birth. One of these dendrons that grow into a large axon, at the initial start, it is a little swollen part, and that's called the axon hillock. This axon hillock then emerges into a long thread-like structure, which is called the axon, and at the end it forms an axon terminal. If we see this image, we can see that surrounding the axon there are myelin sheath, which is an extra insulated covering on the neuron. There are also certain discontinuities between the successive myelin sheath coated Schwann cells, which is the node of Ranvier. This is the place where the impulses can jump and the transmission becomes faster. Neurons are surrounded by glial cells that protect support, and nourish the neural cells. They may be ependymal cells, oligodendrocytes, astrocytes, or microglia when it comes to the central nervous system. Across the peripheral nervous system, we find the satellite cells and the Schwann cells filling the gaps between the neural cells. They are all nutritive and supportive in function towards the nervous system. According to the coatings of insulation, neurons can be subdivided into two basic types. One is unmyelinated nerve fiber or non-myelinated nerve fiber, which doesn't have a coating of myelin sheath over them or medullary sheath over them. The other is that which is surrounded by myelin sheath outside the Schwann cells, which is a layer of fat insulation and more protective for any stimulus that passes through it and doesn't allow any kind of mixing of impulses. Here in the lower diagram, you can see that this axon, which is provided with an extra coating of myelin sheath, which is a secretion produced from the Schwann cells, comes as a heavy coating around the axon with layers of myelin being formed that makes it very protective, and the sweeping of the impulses never get mixed with the impulse sweeping through another channel of neurons. We do have other kinds of categorization amongst the neurons as well based on the number of branchings from a neuron. We may categorize it as unipolar when the cell body has just one single axon emerging out of it. Then we have bipolar neurons where we have one side with an axon and then the other one with a dendrite emerging out of it. These are usually found in the retina and in the olfactory cells of the body. Pseudo-unipolar is another category of the neuron which is usually formed embryologically as a bipolar neuron, but later in the development starts working like a unipolar neuron itself. The most abundant amongst the neurons in human body are the multipolar neurons. There is one axon, but the branchings of the dendrites are huge so that it can form multiple synapses. These are the basic kinds we find in the central nervous system. Abundance of multipolar neurons is the highest in the central nervous system of humans. Depending on their functional activity, neurons are classified into three different types: sensory neuron, followed by interneuron or association neuron, and we have motor neurons. Sensory neurons carry impulses from a sense organ towards the central nervous system, while an interneuron is generally found in the CNS. Here, these association neurons are the efferent divisions of the peripheral nervous system, while we have the final kind, which is the motor neuron. These are the efferent branches present in the brain and the spinal cord, and they bring the responses from the brain or the spinal cord towards a muscle or a gland or any sense organ. Next we have, no single neuron can carry a stimulus and bring a response by itself. For doing so, it requires association between two neurons, and the association between two neurons is what is called synapse. This synapse actually doesn't happen by true contact by holding the branches of dendrites with the branchings of the axon terminals. There is actually a thin gap between the two, and in this thin gap, a neurotransmitter is released by the knob-like structures present on the axon terminals. You can see a magnified image of this knob which holds the neurotransmitter and secretes it at the gap between the two connectors. So once the neurotransmitter is released between this gap, this carries the impulse to the dendrites of the next neuron. This carries on not only between two neurons but till it reaches the central nervous system if the stimulus had started from a sense organ. And then from the central nervous system, another set of neurons will do the similar functioning to make the response travel back to the sense organ to produce an effect. This is a better magnified image of the transmission of impulse through a synapse, where you can see a presynaptic cell present in the axon terminal, and then it is transferring the impulse to the postsynaptic cell present after the dendrites, which is carrying the impulse via the neurotransmitter. Now here we have a diagram showing the entire connection of the receptor cell with the axon endings, then the sensory neurons going and entering into a interneuron in the central nervous system, and then coming out with a response via the motor neuron, and this channel keeps operating to produce responses in the body throughout body cells, and indeed for every response that we produce in different organs, internal cells, and every part of our. Here is an image trying to show the transmission of an impulse through the axon. When the axon is at rest, it is found to have positive charges outside its membrane, and this is a condition which is called polarized state. Soon upon it receives a stimulus, the membrane becomes highly permeable, and that permeability allows the sodium ions to sweep inside the membrane, and in turn the potassium ions are also pumped out by the sodium pump. This keeps repeating. Once the sodium ions have swept inside, this is called an excited state, or also known to be a depolarized condition. This depolarized condition also brings about a previous area to get repolarized by active transport of sodium ions outside. This is achieved by the sodium pump using energy through ATP. Since this keeps continuing, so the entire stimulus is found to move from the soma end of the axon to the axon terminal end, and after the terminal end it again goes through a synapse to jump onto the next neuron. Now we will come across the nerves, because we know our body is innervated throughout. And how do this nerve differ from a neuron, and what are the different kinds of nerves, that we will learn in the next slide. This is the image of a nerve. A nerve is a bundle of axons put together with an insulated covering outside it. That insulated covering is usually made up of connective tissue. Then what happens to the cytons? The cytons lie outside the nerves and they are clustered together to make a ganglia. Now, this is a highly magnified image of a nerve. The nerve, being the bundle of axons, has its own myelin sheath covering against each of the axon. But over and above it, each of these axons get a endoneurium covering when they come into a bundle. And outside that bundle, there is an additional covering of perineurium. Outer to the perineurium is the blood vessels that supply nutrition and oxygen to these axons. These again come with an outermost covering of epineurium. Now it makes us easily understand why none of the impulses or the responses that sweeps through our body never gets intermingled. Now let's know what are the different kind of nerves present in our body. There are three categories. First is the sensory nerve. As the name implies, these are nerves that carry impulses from a sense organ towards the central nervous system. They include optic nerve from the eye, olfactory nerve from the nose. Then the second category is those of the motor nerves. All motor nerves start carrying their impulses from the brain or the spinal cord, that is the central nervous system, and bring a response on the muscles or glands or on some sensory organ. Good examples are oculomotor and trochlear. Then we have the third category, which is mixed nerves. These mixed nerves are composed of both the sensory axons as well as the motor axons. And all spinal nerves are mixed nerves. And a few cranial nerves like the facial nerve and the vagus nerve are of the mixed nerves variety. Here If we speak of the nervous system altogether, we have the central nervous system with the brain and the spinal cord and all other nerves surrounding the brain and the spinal cord who emerge from there but extend to all other body parts. They make the peripheral nervous system. Further, if we see that in this nervous system, we have more classification amongst the peripheral nervous system, which is all surrounding the central nervous system. So this peripheral nervous system has a somatic branch and an autonomic branch. The somatic branch controls all the voluntary or skeletal muscle work, while the autonomic nervous system controls the inner organs like the heart, the smooth muscles, and the glands activity. Again, in this autonomic nervous system, we have two divisions. One is the parasympathetic division, another is the sympathetic division. In this parasympathetic division, mostly the work that it is concerned with is either digestion or the resting conditions. And when it comes to the sympathetic nervous system, when we are active and made alert, it is the sympathetic system that comes with a stimulatory action on the body. This is a diagrammatic expression of the nervous system of human body. The central nervous system shown in the center with the brain and the spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system shown on left and right of it with all the subdivisions also marked out. Here in the written portion, you can see the central nervous system comprising of brain as well as the spinal cord. And here you would find a lot of relay neurons called the interneurons other than the motor neurons. Then we have the peripheral nervous system, which is composed of cranial nerves, spinal nerves, as well as peripheral nerves. This will also contain the sensory neurons as well as some motor neurons. If you have any doubts or queries and that needs to be clarified, you can always drop them in the message box. I will answer them in my available time. Thank you. Thank you for watching. Please do like my video, share it with your friends when you find it interesting, and do not forget to subscribe to my channel because that keeps motivating me. Thank you. Happy watching.